Thank you all for joining us this afternoon. It's great to see some familiar names who have joined us for the last couple of months of our webinar series, and it's great to see some new names as well. Today is the last of our webinar series focused on the vocational rehabilitation program. Today is going to focus on their relationship with schools, how they provide transition services around the state. I'd like to give some reminders to folks as well. If anybody has questions throughout the session, please feel free to either put those questions in the chat and we will make sure that they get addressed. Or if you want to raise your hand and come off mute and ask your question, it's perfectly acceptable as well. We want to make sure that everyone's getting their questions answered as Tracy is sharing some information with you all today. At the end of the session, just as a quick reminder, because I know folks run off quick when the session starts to end, we are going to be sharing a survey with you all just to get some feedback on how the webinar went today. It's really important for us to gather that and figure out ways that we can continue to improve these webinars and the experience for you all as we provide them in the future. And then at the end, I will also talk about what the next sessions of these webinars will be about, so you guys are aware of what's to come. But for now, I'm going to hand things over to Tracy. And Tracy, I will share my screen here in just 1 second.
Thank you, Abel. And welcome. My name is Tracy Parziowski. I'm the statewide transition coordinator for vocational rehabilitation. I'm very glad to be able to come and present information on transition and our pre-employment transition services. Next slide. So today I'm going to talk about VR, what that looks like. I'm going to talk about what our transition services look like. I'm also going to give kind of an overview of pre-employment transition services and how we access those. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. Next slide. So we're hoping today you take away an understanding of how VR works with transition students and the possible services for those high school students in that transition area. We're hoping that you'll understand how VR collaborates with Arizona high schools to provide technical assistance for individualized education plans and during the transition planning process. Next slide. So how does vocational rehabilitation work with youth? So we help youth with disabilities starting at age 14. Those youth have to have a documented disability. That disability needs to create a barrier to employment. And we are basically looking for those individuals who are wanting to prepare for, obtain employment, or keep employment. Next slide. So part of what we do as transition services is we collaborate with various high schools to help students plan for their career goals. This is can be part of the individualized education plan process. We go out to our local high schools and present about our services to students, families, and the staff at the high school to help make them aware of what VR can offer, what services are available to those students, and how we can support them in finding and achieving their employment goals. We also offer pre-employment transition services, which I'll talk a little bit more about later on. We provide consultation and technical assistance for those individualized education plans during that transition planning process at the high school, so that we can help identify what services are available, as well as if there are any community services that we're aware of to support those students in achieving those individualized education plan transition goals. We work on coordination of services with various partners. So if a student has several service agencies that they're working with, or several other agencies like the Department of Developmental Disabilities or a behavioral health clinic, we try and work cooperatively with those education institutions that they're working with to help coordinate those services and get everybody at the table so we can start talking about what does the student actually need for their transition planning, and how are we all going to support that student in getting to that employment goal. We also develop an individualized plan for employment for those students that are eligible for our services. And that plan details the information of what services we're going to be providing, what the goals and objectives are to reach that employment goal for that student, and help give them a roadmap to where they're headed for that career that they've chosen they want to pursue. Next slide. So currently, vocational rehabilitation has about 32 intergovernmental agreements with school districts across the state of Arizona, everywhere from northern Arizona Flagstaff to southern Arizona and St. David and Tucson and Tombstone. There's quite a few of them. Services are actually provided to students that are eligible for VR. And so those individuals receive those vocationally focused services that help them with their transition goals. They receive them on campus during the school day. And those services can include a multitude of things. It may be helping that student with vocational exploration. So testing them on what are their needs, their skills, their interests and abilities, doing interest inventories or working with them on different types of tasks that help them develop an awareness of what they're capable of and what they actually like to do. It also talks about what type of careers are available in their local area, where they might want to apply, what types of careers they actually are interested in that have a local job market and they can get into right away once they graduate or once they've had sufficient training. It helps them to engage in work-based learning experiences, either on the school campus or in the community with partners that TSW, as we like to call them, or Transition from School to Work program, have made partnerships with. We work together cooperatively to help them develop those self-direction skills. So they're working with those students on an active basis to help them learn to direct what they're wanting to do and look at self-advocacy skills as they go forward. And what do they need to be doing to ask for what they need in maybe an employment setting or in a school setting. Those programs also help students to explore different types of learning environments. So helps them to kind of see if they're going into a specific career area, is the best choice for them to be a vocational school? Is it a college or a university that they need to be pursuing? And what goes into going to those places and doing those things so that they are more prepared going forward as they access that extra education post-secondary that they might need to be successful. Next slide. So I said I was going to talk a little bit about pre-employment transition services, and that's what we're going to talk about next. Pre-employment transition services are services that are 5 employment-related services that are available to youth that are students age 14 to 22 with a disability. These services are designed to help them start that process of developing a career pathway. This is kind of that starter service that gets them to that point where they can start thinking about, what do I need to do? How do I need to think about work? What things should I be considering? So this is kind of that beginning for those students to kind of just get that thought process going, because we know a lot of students don't typically start thinking about that till much later in their school career. But we know that success depends on them thinking about it earlier. So we really look at this as a service that helps provide them the information they need to have a real informed choice for what they want to do as their future career goal. It helps students gain more knowledge about their skills, strengths, and abilities so that they can be more successful in that pathway. It provides students with the opportunity to experience different community resources that may be available to them at work environments to increase that career decision-making power that they may want or need to be successful. And it connects students and families to their VR counselors so that they can get those extra services that they may need to help them achieve those employment goals. Next slide. So pre-ed services are 5 workshops in the following areas. So they start with potentially job exploration counseling, which talks about those interest inventories and working through what they need to learn about themselves and what they like and what they don't like, to kind of start exploring those areas, as well as what skills do they have. Okay. It also works with them in work-based learning experiences. This gives them that practical knowledge of on-the-job kind of information. How do we kind of work in a work environment? What do I need to know about myself and a work environment? It gives them the experiences to be able to be informed about what they are capable of and what their true abilities may be and what supports they may need in an employment setting that they may not have considered up to this point. The next type of service workshop is counseling on enrollment for post-secondary education. And that goes back to those services that talk about, what do I need to enroll in a university or college? That may be information on how to fill out a federal student aid form. It may be information about what colleges are in your local area, or what better colleges do you need to pursue. It may talk about vocational schools and different hands-on learning opportunities as opposed to book learning, depending on your needs, skills, and abilities. So there's all of those things in that particular kind of workshop. It also talks about work readiness skills training, and that's those soft skills that any student might need to go from any job. So things like, how do I make sure that my grooming is appropriate for the job that I'm in? How do I dress appropriately for my job? Because we all know if you're dressing for an auto mechanic, you're going to dress very differently than if you're going to be in an office setting. So how do I know what's the appropriate dress that I need to have when I'm getting to my job, and my job specifically? Talks about the different things that you need to know how to communicate with your coworkers and your employer and your employees, and all of those things that you need to know on a regular basis in a job that you go to anywhere. The next one is instruction and self-advocacy, and this is an important one, especially for our youth, because this helps them to start developing those skills to be able to direct their individualized education plan meetings. So helping them to speak up about what they're really wanting and being a part of those individualized education plans and transition plans. So it also helps us to, those students to go ahead and develop information about the community and what community supports are available to them, as well as information. So those types of things. So just those basic skills, these are done in a workshop. So they can be anywhere from 2 hours to several hours, just depending on what they're working through. So it based on the student's needs. All right. So who provides pre-eds? We do. Part of the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act requires that our state VR agencies set aside 15% of their budget for pre-employment transition services. And we have about 20 contracted providers that provide this service statewide. So depending on where you are in the state, you may have multiple providers that are available. You may have a few providers that are available. So as we work through some of that, you know, those services are available for anybody who needs them, that meet those criteria as a student. All right. So VR counselors can also provide pre-eds to their VR clients or other individuals. So as we work with students, as they come into VR and become eligible, they can still get these pre-employment transition services to help them start that process of learning and doing those things, as well as a multitude of other services that they are able to access. We also have some other programs that have started providing those pre-employment transition services that are focused in specific areas. So the Sonoran Center for Excellence in Disabilities provides a work-based learning experience over the summer for students who are in the VR program, and allows those students to really get in there and explore work in a community environment. It helps them to get that hands-on experience and learn about, what do I do well? What do I not do well? What things are exciting? So in places like Ace Hardware, or in an office setting, or there's a multitude of opportunities that they do, trying to match those students to what's that student's interest in working through what they're doing with that student, to explore different types of employment to help them gain more knowledge and information about what they want to do as a career. We also have several school districts that the Sonoran Center is working with to develop work-based learning programs on their campuses and with their communities. So they're working with them and they're doing those CREAs as they go out in the community and develop relationships with partners, so that students are getting those work-based learning experiences while they're in school, and getting those experiences on a regular basis. So they're learning about their skills and abilities through those partnerships. We have some services that we work with through Diverse Ability. We support the Arizona Youth Leadership Forums that allow students to learn about self-advocacy and become their own advocates in a peer-to-peer format. This allows students to actually have peers talk to them about, what they're doing and what their goals are, and give them advice on a direct level, and support them in learning about what they can do to advocate for themselves, as well as exploring other things like, what do I want to do, and how do I create a peer-based plan, and what is a person-centered plan, and how do we develop those things. So those types of services are available through that contract. Next slide. So how does somebody access these pre-employment transition services? And one of the things that I want to mention is pre-employment transition services are available to those individuals who are a VR client. So they become eligible through the process of becoming a VR client, and those who are what we call potentially eligible. And a potentially eligible is an individual who has an individualized education plan or a 504 plan, or is eligible for those. So, and is a student between those ages of 14 and 22. So if somebody wants to get these services, they're free, they're funded through VR, and they can go to our website, which is pictured here, by doing an internet search using the term Arizona Pre-Employment Transition Services. And it should be one of those first things that pops up on your screen. So it helps that that's very true, and you're looking for a DES website that looks like this. Here you're going to find all the information that's necessary for somebody to learn about the program. Gives you an overview of the different workshop areas to kind of help make a decision about what your student needs, and what services might be the best fit for that individual. It also talks about the eligibility criteria of who can apply for the service. And then it also provides a provider list. And let's go to the next slide. So some of the things we like to talk about is when somebody's choosing what pre-employment transition workshops they need, we want to have kind of that thought process going on with that. So we really need to be looking at what skills or knowledge does the student need to make those best career choices. So some of the things that might be considered when you're looking at these pre-employment transition workshops to work with the student is, has the student ever worked before? Do they have work experience already? So they may not need as many work-based learning experiences, but maybe they need more experience in another area, like self-advocacy. Maybe they struggle to speak up for themselves in an employment setting. Does the student know what they want to do as a career? So maybe they're at those first levels, they haven't really thought about what I want to do. They're just kind of saying, when somebody asks them, I don't know. And so you really want to kind of look at that and see, is that where they're at? Then some job exploration counseling might be appropriate to help them develop what's out there, what are my interests, what are my skills, and what really fits for me. Does the student know what work is and what it takes to work? In that respect, if they are needing skills in that area, they may want to do some work readiness. That particular skill kind of helps them develop the information they need about what is work and how does it function and what do I need to be concerned about. Do I know how tired I'll get if I'm on a work environment? Do I know if there's specific work environments that are not right for me? So those kind of skills that they can kind of get going forward. Does the student want to go to college? What do they know about further training after high school? This is where those counseling on post-secondary education skills come in under the pre-employment transition services. It allows them to develop some of those skills and answer some of those questions. Do they want to go to college? After exploring what's available to them, do they think that's their best avenue? Right? So next slide. So choosing a service provider. This is a hard thing for a lot of people to do because you don't know the service providers up front. But we do provide you with a pre-employment transition services contract directory that gives you a little bit of information about each of those providers, as well as a way to contact them by either email or telephone or both. Some of the things that students and families want to probably think about when they're choosing a provider is asking some of the questions of, is the provider already working with the student school? Because we know that a lot of our pre-employment transition providers actually have developed some relationships with specific school districts. And in those partnerships, they're providing services to students on a regular basis. If they're already working with their school district, sometimes it's an easier transition for that student to get those services because the school district is helping to facilitate that. Is there a provider available in the student's county to provide services? We should have coverage all across the state to provide services. So that shouldn't be an issue, but it is something that potentially could be a question they want to ask. And who is that provider and what do they know about that provider starting up? Some of the other questions they may want to ask is, how does the provider present those pre-employment transition services? Are they the right fit for that student? Some like to provide them via video, some provide in person. Some may use specific technology or techniques to present the information that may or may not be right for that student. And how do they have that discussion with that provider to make sure that that student's getting the services that they need? So also, does the provider meet the student's needs? Some of our providers have other specialties that they work with on a regular basis. So it may be, depending on that student's needs or disability, that a specific provider might be better for them than another one because they have experience working with that disability type, or they know more about that individual population to help support that service provision. Asking those questions can kind of get the families into learning about these folks a little more. Next slide. So what's the next step? Once you've chosen a provider, and you're working through, you want to fill out that complete pre-ETS request form. So we have a request form that's on that website that you were shown previously, and that request form is a fillable form. And so we want to have those family members and students fill in this form completely. So fill out all the sections on page 1, and then work through, if they have connection to their school, which hopefully they do as a student with a disability, they're working with somebody at their school district, a special ed director or a case manager, that can help them by signing the back of the form that asks if they're a student with a disability, and that teacher can sign the back of that form, and they won't have to submit any further documents as far as an IEP or a 504 plan or other medical or psychological documentation that shows the diagnosis of a disability, right? So if they're in high school, that teacher signs that and they move on and they can submit that form right away. If they have enrolled in maybe a post-secondary education program because they've graduated high school, they may need to submit that enrollment with their form to help them access the services. So that's something that you want to make sure that they're understanding. Okay. Also, if they're over 18, one of the things that we ask, if they have a legal guardian, that we also have that guardianship paperwork submitted with that request form, so that we know going forward and make sure that those right folks are involved in that individual's case and moving forward with their pre-ETS request. Next slide. So the pre-ETS request form asks basically for some personal and demographic information, what grade that individual is in high school, when they are potentially graduating, and any accommodations they might need, because we want to make sure that those accommodations are known so that we can work with them to have the right services in place. We ask that they put on there those pre-ETS requested contractor and provider, so that you had chosen before, so that we make sure and know who's your choice of provider, so that we can make sure that we get that right one that you've already done that interview for. There's also a place for signature for both the student and the parent or guardian. So it's important that those signatures be in place, and all of that is literally filled out as completely as possible. Next slide. So this is the verification section we're talking about. And so this is really more for your school district staff to assist you, or a VR counselor to assist you in accessing these services by verifying that you're working with a student with a disability that either has an individualized education plan or has services under 504. So these are important things for that signature from that school provider to help you with. Otherwise, other documents like your individualized education plan and or a 504 would need to be submitted with the document to attain these services. So who can help facilitate youth getting into these services, right? And so all these great things, but how do we get them there? So part of this is teachers, parents, VR counselors, other provider agencies, and other community partners can assist youth in getting these documents filled out and submitted through our RSA transition at azdes.gov mailbox. It's something that they can help. So they can help them review the pre-ETS overview information, help them make decisions about what they think they're needing. So helping those students to look at what are their options and what do they need, and advocating for those needs. They can help the student by getting the signatures needed to complete the form. So teachers can get those signed back pages so they don't have to submit that extra documentation, and give it a little bit easier process. So that's a great thing to advocate and facilitate for them. It also, they can invite VR rehabilitation counselors or pre-ed specialists to speak with your different groups or agencies or a school, or talk with your teachers about, hey, why isn't pre-eds at my school? Those kind of things. So you can help facilitate those types of conversations and help them. So they can help learn about pre-eds, so they can be part of that transition planning, because pre-employment transition services are something that teachers can add to their transition plans. So it's important for us to look at these as part of that transition process. They can actually develop and enhance what teachers are already doing with students. So adding that maybe community element. So that helps, right? Next slide. So I wanted to share with you a little bit, because we did some surveys not too long ago, what some of the teachers who have brought these services into their classrooms have expressed about these services. So some of the comments that we had are actually on one of our newer flyers that's available on the Department of Ed website, actually. So they're talking about students are learning about what they need to have successful transition. And then they're seeing excitement in students about the program and about their future. So those types of things have been seen as positives going forward with achieving and doing some of these services through the school district and with those students. They're gaining that support for further education plans and working through that. And so I had a question in the chat that says, can a VR client obtain a list of providers from the VR counselor? They certainly can, but those providers are actually on the website, and you can download them directly from that DES Pre-ED's website at the beginning. But the VR counselor can certainly provide that. So I had another question that said, what pre-ed services may be available to Native American students who may not be already served fully in pre-eds? So those services available to those Native American students are all those services. They should be available to all of them. So if they're not receiving that full range of pre-ed services, they can request those services through our website. So that's something that anyone can do. So yeah, please make sure that they are aware that if they're only receiving maybe work-based learning experiences, they can certainly branch out and send in a request for maybe further services like self-advocacy or counseling on post-secondary. So they can kind of develop those skills and abilities that maybe they need to be successful in transition. So there is a comment that Indigenous students, they're not at this time, are vendors that can be identified for this purpose. So yeah, we are working with those 22 vendors. And if you have a specific need, one of the things you can do is email that RSA transition at azdes.gov, and they can direct you to those vendors that are working in those areas, so that you have a list of those individuals. So, and they can help connect you if you're having trouble connecting to a particular provider. Those pre-ed specialists are there and available to help connect you directly to who is available in your area and how they can assist you. So they can provide you with that guidance for those connections. Great question. Other questions? You're very welcome, yeah. All right. Next slide. So And then to talk a little bit about why pre-ETS and VR transition services are important. Sometimes we forget that youth with significant disabilities may have had little or no exposure to work. Their exposure to work may have been so minimal that they are not even sure what work is. So we definitely want to provide them with those opportunities to explore what work is and how it relates to them and how it can enrich and be part of their lives. So yeah, that's something that's important. And youth with little exposure to work usually have limited work readiness skills and may not be able to tell what they like or don't like in a work environment. They haven't had the experience to say, yeah, I really like sweeping, or I really like doing, bagging, or I really like working in a hospital environment, or I really like working in a hardware environment or a shop. They haven't had those experiences to be able to say, oh, a shop is too loud. It doesn't work for me because I can't concentrate, or I can't think, or I really thought I'd like to be in an environment where, there's a hospital, but it's too much and there's too much rushing going on, or it's perfect. I never thought I could work in a hospital, and that's perfect, and I love it, and it's perfect for me because it has all of these things going on and it's exciting. So youth need those experiences just like anybody else to be able to make those choices as they go forward looking for career. Youth career exploration and work-based learning experiences help them start seeing what I'm capable of. How do I work best? How do I know what I'm good at? How do I become a part of a team? It increases their self-esteem to be in these environments and working forward. And it helps them with that self-determination knowledge. It gives them a place to be and things to ask about themselves, and it shows them what their strengths are. A lot of our families don't recognize what those strengths are because they haven't been in those environments either. So this gives families an opportunity to see, wow, my students that, won't clean up at home, we put them in a work environment and they can clean all day. So there's that amazement piece that comes in when they actually start learning about what they're really, really capable of, and not what somebody has told them they're capable of. So it's super important that these kind of services that allow them to explore those skills and abilities are done to give them that basis of information. And so it helps them also get more information about what's out there. Our exposure to work sometimes is very limited when we're a young individual. We know what we've seen our parents do, we know what we've seen our brother do, our cousin do, who may be older, but those are the only things we know about. So when we start imagining ourselves in an employment setting, sometimes it's not what it could be, it's what we know. So there is that potential for them to branch out of those places and those careers that they've only seen, and understand what is really out there for them and what really fits what they are wanting to do and what they really like to do and be successful at. Kim asked, how can I attain info about the Sonoran Center Summer Work-Based Learning Program? And I believe that they have information on their website, as well as you can email us at that RSA transition@azds.gov. And we can also provide you with further information about that. Kamala asked, will the pre-ETS application automatically enroll them with VR, or will they need a VR referral as well? They will need a separate VR referral. So unfortunately, the pre-ETS is only providing them information about and getting them set up for those pre-employment transition services. So in order for them to become a VR client, they would need to complete our VR referral, which is available on our DES website, and you can find it there. and fill out that information. Or if a student or a family member or somebody is struggling with filling out that form themselves, they can call the number on the website and actually have somebody help them fill out that form and get it submitted to their local vocational rehabilitation office so they can get started on that eligibility process. Yeah, thanks for that question, Pamela. It's a great one. All right, next slide. So I put my contact information in here. And that RSA transition at azdes.gov, because I wanted to make sure that you had it. And I know I've repeated a lot of times, but those pre-employment transition services are an important part of getting students started on that information process. And if you have questions about the services or you want to access the services, that's a good place to start. They can direct you. So it helps you to kind of get to that place where you need to be. And you can also email myself at tzweig@azds.gov, or call me at 480-431-0084 if you have further questions about transition and VR and what we can do to help students. There's a multitude of services that we provide to support students in exploring and achieving those employment outcomes. So once a student is graduated from high school and transitioning, we continue with those VR services that help them to reach those employment goals, whether that's job development services or some form of supports that they may need on the job. We work with them until they have achieved what is necessary to be employed in that career goal. Any other questions? I want to thank you for those.
Hi, Tracy. Thank you so much for joining us today and sharing all of that great information. I see the question in there from Dorothy. Yes, so all of our webinars are recorded, and once the recording is ready, it's sent out through our listserv. So anybody who registers for any of our webinars, they're automatically added to our listserv. So yes, this presentation will be sent out to everybody. I believe, and Lizzie can correct me if I'm wrong, I believe they're also being stored on our new website. So I do want to give a quick shout out to that as well. We have launched a new website, finally, long overdue. If anybody had seen our old website, and the new website looks great. So Lizzie, great job on all of that. But yeah, please confirm that we also uploaded on there for me.
Yes, we sure do. The webinars will be uploaded on there as well as sent out via email. This recording will probably be ready in about 2 weeks.
And then we just posted the link for the survey today. So please provide us some quick feedback before you take off. I also want to share with everybody what's coming. So we will not have one of our advancing employment webinar series for the month of June. We're going to take the month of June off, but starting in July, we'll not launch a new series of topics. So, July we'll have some guests coming to talk about disability benefits, some of the basics about disability benefits that are available to individuals. For August, we will have a session on braided funding, talking about how, funding between schools, vocational rehabilitation, and some other partners can be used together to benefit an individual. And then the following month, we will have a session from our tribal vocational rehabilitation partners, talking about some of the basics on tribal VR programs in our state. So keep an eye out. There'll be an announcement coming out and registration links for those next 3 webinars coming in the next couple of weeks. Thank you, everybody.